Hi there, my name is Stacey Goldring. Welcome to Chapter Endnotes, and this month we're going to talk about Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. Let me start off by saying, full disclosure, I love this book. So whether you love this book or not, by the time I wrap this discussion with you, I hope you'll have a little bit of a better understanding of why this book is so important and why it's important for you to have read Mrs. Dalloway, or at least cracked open the first page so you can read what the entire story is about in the very first sentence. And then you can tell everyone how much you hated the book or how much you loved it just by that very first sentence. So won't that be great? You won't even have to get through the whole thing if you didn't like it. And for those of you who want to stay and take a deep dive into Mrs. Dalloway and Virginia Woolf, you've come to the right place. All right, so let's get started. I'm going to go ahead and read the very first sentence to you. This happens to be the most latest copy that I have. The other copies I have are so beat up, it was embarrassing to even bring them. And by the way, this one gives a really good introduction. By Jenny Ophel. It was fair. That's the foreword. Here's the introduction. Whoever did the introduction, it was really good. I really enjoyed it. Okay, so the first line of the book is basically the plot. We have a little map in here of London, which is very nice. And London actually is a character in the book. Let me go ahead. I have so many notes. I have so many notes written just in the introduction. It's insane. All right. Sorry, that's a little sound of freedom up ahead. Sorry about that. Okay. Mrs. Dalloway said she would buy the flowers herself. That's basically the entire plot of the book. Mrs. Dalloway goes out, buys flowers for herself for a party she's going to throw that evening, and a party she throws. The End by Virginia Woolf. So that's the very short story. Clearly, it is so much more than that. And that's what we're going to find out right now. So that is the miniature version, and just some fun facts based on that story that I just told you about Mrs. Dalloway. This book was originally called The Hours. And you may think, aha, I think I saw a film with Nicole Kidman of it by the same name. Indeed, you did. And of course, Michael Cunningham wrote the book, The Hours, both inspired by and written about Virginia Woolf and Mrs. Dalloway. This is actually a combination of two short stories that Virginia Woolf had written prior. One was Mrs. Dalloway in Bond Street, and another was the unfinished The Prime Minister. So she puts those two together. And there's a lot of spoiler alerts. So if you didn't like the book, this is also the place to come, because I will tell you right now that the original book, originally there was no Septimus in the book at all. And also, Clarissa, Virginia Woolf planned to kill off during the party. And if you're thinking, this sounds vaguely familiar, like Nella Larsen's Passing, you would be right. And there has been scholarship comparing the two. So if you have not read Passing by Nella Larsen, once you finish this book, I highly suggest you pick up Passing by Nella Larsen, another fabulous book. All right. So we have the action taking place on a Wednesday in June. It's post-World War I, and we find Clarissa Dalloway, age 51 or 52, depending on your source, walking through London on her way to the florist to buy some flowers for a wedding, for a party she's putting on that evening. She is the wife of a politician, and this is this is her very important role. And what you do is you give parties, you gather information, you connect people, and in Malcolm Gladwellian terms, she would be considered a connector. All right, so the medium version of this story would be during her walk to the florist, and as she's going through her routine for the day, she thinks back on her life growing up. So we have flashbacks, right? We have times where our main character, Clarissa Dalloway, thinks back on her life and her happiest days that she spent with her friends, Sally Sexton and Peter Walsh, growing up. Her mind wanders. She wonders, should I have married Peter Walsh instead of Richard Dalloway? What if, when it comes to her friend Sally Sexton? Meanwhile, somewhere else in London, we have Septimus Warren Smith, who is he has survived the First War. He fought in the war. This is a man certainly who has shell shock. Today, we would say he has PTSD. He is having reoccurring visions of seeing his dead friend Evans, who died right before the war was over. And he is experiencing hallucinations. So we have two pillars of the story structure right there told within these two characters. We have Septimus and we have Clarissa. They are both dealing in a post-World War I world, but under very different circumstances defined by their sex and their class. All right. The two never meet in the book. However, because of Virginia Woolf's amazing storytelling ability, there is cross-pollination. There are these intersections. The first one takes place while Clarissa's buying flowers. All of a sudden, there's a large bang. And Clarissa hears it and says to the floor, my God, was that a pistol shot? Whereas across town, someone else hears it, and that someone else is Septimus. And he immediately is triggered and has a reaction as if the world is ending, what's going to happen next, because he's so raw from the war. Interspersed between all of that, we have several other characters who also react to the sound. They may either say something about it or they're thinking about it. And that's the beauty of Virginia Woolf and what she does in this book. We are allowed to go mind hopping from thought to thought, from conversation to conversation throughout this story. And we're getting to hear what other characters are thinking and conversations that they're having with one another, as if we are dealing with a bunch of different atoms all spinning around, and we're just kind of like a drone's eye view looking down on it all and seeing how this whole day unfolds through the minds and the conversations of whoever we're bouncing off of and their relation to Clarissa. So think of her as the nucleus, and everyone is somehow connected directly or indirectly to her. That is the structure of the book. It's a very chaotic structure, but it was a structure that Virginia thought was the only way to tell a story post-World War I, because up into the war, there was a certain traditional way of telling a story, as she called it, the traditionalists. And after the war, she felt this type of storytelling where you have organized chapters and where you have sequential events. You have a situation happen. The hero has a challenge. The hero has to then figure out how to overcome that challenge. And then the end of the story comes. She felt that kind of plot no longer applied. We live in a world that is so injured and hurt by the war that we have to learn literature has to tell a story differently. It has to be real. She felt these if-then stories or linear stories no longer work because it wasn't really capturing life. It wasn't really real. So what she does is she comes up with an entirely new way of storytelling where she takes time and intersections and parallels. She gets rid of chapters and sections. She gets rid of who's talking and when they're talking. She bends time. Things are happening in the future or happening in the past, and at the same time, happening simultaneously. Excuse my parched throat. Please get yourself something to drink. I hate to drink alone. Okay, so she does all of this, and it's called I can't say the word, but it's it's at the same time, right? So we have the example of the car backfiring. We have another example when people see an important car go by. Who's in the car? Could it be the prime minister? Is it the king? Is it someone special? And all these different characters, some we only see once, some are repeated, are commenting on this one situation. Then again, we're all of a sudden in Regent's Park, and there we have Septimus and his wife sitting on a park bench. He's obviously having a traumatic episode. He's seeing Evans. He's worrying about what's happening. And Peter Walsh, Clarissa's old flame, walks by and sees those two people, takes a look and thinks, my God, that couple, man, they have problems. Of course, he says it in a much nicer way. But both of these people are connected to Clarissa, but Clarissa does not ever interact with all three of them. In fact, she never, ever interacts with Septimus. What brings her together with Septimus, P.S., fast forward to the end of the book, at the party, one of her invitees, Dr. Bradshaw, comes late. He and his wife come late. Why are they late? Because they have just tended to a suicide. Septimus, overcome by guilt about what happened to his friend Evans in the war, overcome by his PTSD and shell shock, he can no longer live in this world. And so he takes his own life by jumping out of a window. So this also is a very autobiographical book in nature, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. But for now, this is another way that I'm showing you how Virginia Woolf creates these moments of intersection throughout the book, where it is actually Bradshaw that connects Clarissa to Septimus, who is her foil. All right. Virginia Woolf wanted to create Dalloway to, quote, show a world seen by both the sane and the insane side by side. Septimus and Clarissa both find moments of joy and moments of terror in the world. Clarissa has this ambient understanding, although she seems all calm on top, that she understands that there is trauma in the world. But because of her class, because of who she ends up being, she realizes that she can keep that all at bay. She does have one moment where she thinks she could give in to the pain that Septimus gives into. And that also comes at the end of the story after Dr. Bradshaw enters the party and starts talking about Septimus' suicide. And she's thinking, oh my God, don't talk about death at my party. Please, please, please do not talk about that. And she has to leave the room. And as she leaves the room, she goes into like an anteroom, a room off in the corner. And she too looks out a window and imagines Septimus's demise and makes a decision right there that, it was actually brave what he did. He had to stand for something, and he couldn't stand the horror in this world. So she saw his suicide as a way of trying to control life and live or take life on his terms. But she decides that she will embrace the life she has and just see the beauty in it. These are all incredibly autobiographical threads. All right. So the characters in the book, I'm just going to name a few. There are so many, but ones in which you should be aware, or if someone should bring up the book, you can say, oh yeah, I remember that character, but you really don't, but that's okay. And I want to give credit to Jess Amy Hawk, who is an illustrator, because I found online, you can go to Jess Amy hawk.bigcartel.com and find, I printed it out. She really did a great job of all the characters who are connected to Clarissa. This was a beautiful illustration she did and how they're all connected. You can tell there's several characters here in the book. I will try to put a link in the description below that can tell you how you can go online and see it as well. But it's great if you can use something like this to follow along. So obviously our main character is Clarissa Dalloway. She's actually based on a, not only on, she's a certain caricature or stereotype of a certain type of woman of that time period. But there are also elements of Kitty Lushington, who was a friend of Virginia Woolf's mother's, who she bases this character on. There's a coldness to her, an impenetrability to her. She loves, quote, life, London, this moment in June. And of course, she loves her parties because she knows she's good at giving parties. She knows she's a good connector, and God bless her. She recognizes her gift and she puts it to good use. And guess what? It is not the first time that we see Clarissa in a Virginia Woolf book. She appears in several other of her short stories, but it is not until we get to Dalloway, like I said at the beginning, which is a combination of two stories, that we have her completely fleshed out. We have her daughter, Elizabeth Dalloway. She's 17 years old. What's interesting about Elizabeth is Clarissa and many of her age in this story are looking back on their life. They're looking at the what ifs, what could have been, and what is no longer possible. But in the case of her daughter, Elizabeth, it is about possibility. In fact, Elizabeth says, you know what, when I grow up, I'm either going to be a doctor or a farmer. Two things that Clarissa, was never on the horizon for her. We have her husband, who is that stiff, political guy. He feels kind of disconnected from his wife. He does love her, and she loves him because he's the safe one. And she's the perfect politician's wife. The way he shows love to her, he can't come out and say that he loves her, but when a friend is buying jewelry for his wife, he decides to go and buy Clarissa flowers. And she sees that gesture, and that was a heavy lift for him, and she loves him for it. Miss Doris Kilman is Elizabeth's tutor. She is interestingly very sympathetic to the Germans, which shows you what's happening in the world at that time. Clarissa hates her. She's jealous of her because she spends so much time with Elizabeth, and it is clear that Doris is incredibly jealous of Clarissa. Sally Sexton. This is Clarissa's crush from growing up. She's now married and has 5 strong boys. She chooses the safe way out. Whether or not they were lovers, there is a kiss exchanged, but we have to understand both the context of the times and how women interacted. And we also have to recognize that Virginia Woolf had relationships with men and women. So it very well could have been a lesbian relationship. It doesn't really matter. The idea is that unfortunately that avenue of a relationship could not be made available to either of them in the story. Although Vanessa enjoys a beautiful relationship with Vita Sackville West. And if you watch my video on All Passion Spent, you can learn all the details of their amazing relationship. We have Lucretia Warren Smith, who is Septimus' wife, and she is worried about her husband. She's homesick for Italy, and she just does not want to believe that he is ill. The book is an indictment of how mental health was handled during that time period. Virginia Woolf also suffered tremendously from mental illness, and it comes across in this book clearly that it is something that's not handled well. Basically it was either, toughen up, or you need rest and ice baths and being force fed or whatever. There just was not what is made available today. Peter Walsh is Clarissa's old flame. He challenged her. He made life difficult for her because he made her make choices, and she didn't choose him. She chose the safe bet, which was Richard. Hugh Whitbread is just the pompous guy. He has some job at Buckingham Palace. No one's really quite sure what he does. He's kind of, a nudge, but, we keep him around because we have a history with him. The man loves to eat. He's he's just a blowhard, basically. There's also The psychiatrist who we discussed earlier is Septimus Dr. Sir William Bradshaw, who his recommendation for Septimus and basically anyone who has a nervous breakdown, which is go spend time in the country. Lady Millicent Bruton, I love this character because obviously she is the doyenne of all things political, but because she's a woman, she cannot be a decision maker, but she can certainly be what we call today an influencer, and she brings together as this very fashionable Mayfair hostess, she brings together Hugh, I believe it's Hugh. Yeah, and Richard Dalloway together to write a letter to the editor in order to deal with the immigrant problem. So see, some things never change. Immigrant problems then, we still feel we have immigrants problems now, whatever. And then there are several other characters in the book, too many to mention here. So what's so great about Mrs. Dalloway? Why should we read it? Why do some people want to throw the book at the wall with great force? Many reasons. Some is it's great and a pain because it's a challenge to read. You're not used to it. People weren't used to it when it was published, and people still aren't used to it today. It is stream of consciousness, and it's one of the first times it's used. We are in a this book is a reaction to the war. I can't emphasize that enough, just like we have books coming out today as a reaction to COVID, as a reaction, we write as a reaction to what we're around today. That's what novelists do. They capture the here and now. And that's exactly what Virginia Woolf was doing. And for her, you had to do it right. It had to be real. It had to kind of be like a drone's eye view of everything going on. So it was stream of consciousness. It was what people were thinking. And my God, if we didn't have Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf, we couldn't have had Catcher in the Rye, which would be a total travesty. We couldn't have had Zuckerman. We couldn't have Philip Roth's Zuckerman. Now, some of you may say, oh God, that could have saved us. But what I'm saying is this whole idea of just switching voice from one character to another, switching, going back and forth through time with no warning, no chapter change, no he said, she said, you'd have no Faulkner. Wouldn't have happened without stream of consciousness. We wouldn't have had The Stranger by Camus. This is an incredibly important book. I encourage you to read it. And in a few minutes, I will tell you how the scholars suggest how you should read it. Okay. All right, so like I said, the style is very challenging. Also, we have direct and indirect dialogue, meaning we do have some quotes, then we have some things where people are just thinking, there's a narrator, kind of, not really. Narrator seems to know what's going on, but we're not really sure who the narrator is. But anyway, the book has been compared to James Joyce's Ulysses. I tried reading this book. I did. There was a guy shaving. I think his name's Bloom. And then I didn't get any more what was happening. I will try again at some point to read Ulysses. Obviously, there are people who make pilgrimages to Dublin in order to read this book. I wish I could be one of them. I would do it for Edna O'Brien, though. But anyway, so this book has been compared to Joyce. Our author actually had an opportunity to publish James Joyce's Ulysses, if you were with us when we read Sylvia Beach's Shakespeare and Company. I don't know if I've done a video on that yet, but if I haven't, I really should because it's one of my favorite books. I should. Anyway, so in that book, we find out that it's Sylvia Beach who ends up publishing Shakespeare and Company. It's Sylvia Beach of Shakespeare and Company in Paris who ends up publishing James Joyce's Ulysses because the obscenity laws in the UK would not allow for Virginia's press, which was called Hogarth Press, that she opened with her husband in 2017. Skipping ahead a wee bit, please try to keep up. If not, it's just stream of consciousness. This is what happens when I read books. I tend to absorb them. Anyway, So it has been compared to that book, which I find very interesting. This was much more readable. And if you want to try another stream of consciousness, if this didn't work out for you, I would try The Dubliners by James Joyce. That I could get through. There were chapters involved, and that's why I kind of knew who was speaking. That's not a bad book. I would definitely try. I would read that again. Let me know if you've read that and what you think if you've read that one. Okay. What does Virginia Woolf have to say about fiction, about writing fiction? Quote, life is not a series of gig lamps systematically arranged, but a luminous halo, a semi-transparent envelope surrounding us from beginning of consciousness to the end. I don't know if you can hear that, but there's a pileated woodpecker outside, and he's been out here with his mate, I don't know, for the past few days, and they're just having the best time. Okay, I really shouldn't go on about, we have a snag outside my office here. A snag is a tree that's dead, but it's still standing, so you should never cut them down because that's where all their food is. That's where all the bugs are, and that's where they make their nest. So they're nesting in there. So it's very exciting. Anyway, I digress. All right. So she also says, in an ordinary day, there are thousands of ideas going through our heads, thousands of emotions in astonishing disorder. So, there's a whole mess of things going on. Before you started watching this video, let's look at the last 5 minutes of your life before you got on this video. What were you doing? Whatever it was, I bet you were thinking a bazillion other things before you started watching this video. Well, this is exactly what she's trying to capture, this kind of life. And as this video is going on, maybe you're also doing a bazillion other things. Now try to write that in a book. And that's exactly what Virginia Woolf tries to do. So we're thinking all these thoughts. In fact, in another book club I had like this just this morning, a therapist explained to us that a person has between 40 and 50,000 thoughts a day. That's a lot of thoughts. So just imagine if we said everything out loud that we were thinking, we would not be cool. But what she's doing is she's saying that this creates a lot of tension. What you say, what you don't say, what you're thinking while someone is talking to you, there's so much going on. But despite all of that, we are still beings who want to make connections with other people. And that's challenging and that's hard. And that can be misunderstood. That can come out, poorly. It may be misunderstood, but that's what we try to do. And it's that kind of confusion and clarity that she tries to capture in this book. It's a tall order. It's a very tall order. Quote, is it not the task of the novelist to convey this varying, this unknown, an uncircumscribed spirit with as little mixture of the alien and external as possible? Isn't life like this? And indeed, it is. And that's what she wanted the novel to represent. So if I were a defense attorney, if I was making a case for my defendant, Mrs. Dalloway and Virginia Woolf, just watching my dog out there. Okay. I agree, Your Honor, and jury, that this work can be confusing. It does seem to hop around everywhere. We're dealing with people who are changing their mind, thinking one thing, saying another. It is giving a broad view. Oh my gosh, I have to let my dog in. I'm so sorry. Stand by. I'm so sorry. Come on, Coco, let's go. Come on. Here we go. I'm back. I'm so sorry. So we're back with Coco. So Coco can now join us. People are even talking to themselves in this book, and don't we all do that? Or we talk to our dogs, right? But this is, so with all this going on, here is how scholars suggest we should read her work. Read it, try more than once. I actually also have some suggestions. Try more than once. Read it once just to determine what the heck is going on, right? So you'll read it once and you're going to try to, quote unquote, determine the structure of the book. So once you see that this seems to be brain hopping, right, and conversation hopping, once that happens, try it again and try to pick up some of the details. look at this work as you would look at a painting. You gotta like look at it. You gotta study it. You gotta think about it. Leave it, come back to it. Or better yet, think about it as a work of art. Here, go ahead. Okay, that's the end with you. Think of it as like a work of art, or going to the symphony and listening to some beautiful music. You know, every time you sit down and listen, may come across a little differently to you. The first time I started reading this book, I hated it. I had no idea what was going on. Didn't make any sense to me. So I called a friend. That shows you how old I am. So I call a friend. So I call my friend and I say, this book is the worst. I'm going to go and I'm going to get the Cliff's Notes. Again, I'm showing you how old I am. And you know what she told me? She told me the smartest thing, and I will share it with you. She said, that's not what the author would want. Okay, that's not what the author would want. The author would just want you to read it. Now, if you're still with me in this video, this tells me two things about you. One, you are probably a type A personality. Like if you start something, you're going to finish it. Two, that you're probably the type of person that when you read a book, if you don't know something, you're going to look it up. And I'm going to tell you, don't do that anymore. Stop it. Just stop it. You know, we have the entire world at our fingertips with this thing, right? But that ruins the art of reading. The author does not intend for you to Google everything and look everything up. The author is telling you a story. The author is asking for you to listen. By reading this book, you are doing yourself an incredible favor. It is at this point in our society, it is actually a sacred act because you are saying, I will not be disturbed. This is a priority. I'm going to experience literature. The rest of you will just have to wait. That is an amazing experience nowadays. So I will ask you, as you try to read Mrs. Dalloway, don't Google anything. Don't look anything up. And just read the book. Allow yourself to do that and see what happens. Okay, so themes. If you're here for an academic reason and you need to write down what are the themes of Mrs. Dalloway, I will go ahead and share that with you right now. The themes are time, she deals with time, mental illness, existential issues. Why are we here? Why am I here? Why is Evans not here? Why did I not marry Peter? Why didn't I go further with Sally? Why didn't I get these flowers, etc.? It's important to know that we view Virginia today, I'm on a first name basis with her, as a feminist author, incredibly important feminist author. And if you're not familiar with Angel in the House, that poem, that short story about the ideal Victorian woman, I highly suggest that you go read it and you can understand why Clarissa was the way she was and aspired to that. Homosexuality, being a lesbian themes, it is seen as, unrequited love between she and Sally. It's also been suggested that Septimus and Evans can be read in that way as well as a homosexual relationship. So you have so many amazing rabbit holes to fall into in Virginia Woolf. I won't go into any more of them right here. I just wanted to give you an overview. Now, if you are a member of Chapter Endnotes Book Club, you do have an opportunity to stay with us and have access to our video that goes into great detail about everything I just discussed and talk about Virginia Woolf's timeline. And let me tell you, her life, okay, it is linear. It's fascinating. We deal with mental illness, incredible brilliance. She was a real trailblazer. If you're familiar with the Bloomsbury Group, we learn all about that as well. So if you have not joined, I encourage you to join. So I will wrap with this. Virginia Woolf is a respected author. She is a pioneer of modernism and stream of consciousness. After the war, after World War II, she fell out of favor. She was respected, but her work was considered dated. In the late 1960s, when the feminism movement comes on the scene, is when her nonfiction is discovered, particularly A Room of Her Own, A Room of One's Own, and Three Guineas. These are two essays that I go into depth in members only. But it's the nonfiction that brings Virginia back on the scene today. And today we have something called the Virginia Woolf industry. I mean, you can get her face on a mug, on a mouse pad, an umbrella. She's just become part of the culture. She is one of the most thoroughly documented of any modern author. Many of her essays, and she wrote over 500, were originally lectures. She's been translated into more than 50 languages, her book. You may be familiar with her other books, To the Lighthouse, Orlando, A Room of One's Own. In popular culture, you may be familiar with the film and the play, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, 1962, which is probably one of the best plays, and Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton star in the movie. One of the greatest lines in movie history comes out in this film when, after going to a party that was not successful, Elizabeth Taylor walks into the kitchen, and out of the icebox, she pulls out leftover chicken and grabs a leg and just looks around with clearly she's had a bit to drink. She's taken a bite of the cold chicken, and she looks around at the kitchen. She looks at her husband, and she makes a profound statement. She just says, "What a dump." And that delivery, that's art. Anyway, I will leave you with one of Virginia Woolf's most important quotes of all time. And that comes from A Room of One's Own, when she says that that every woman needs 500, I believe it was 500 pounds. Every woman, in order to write, needs basically her own money and a room of her own. So I hope that you have enjoyed this very quick overview of Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. And if you have not yet, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell to hear what's next from Chapter Endnotes Book Club. I would love for you to join. You go to chapterendnotes.com and you can go ahead and become a member. If you're a member, we have very lengthy discussions where you can participate, and then they're available online in our replay library. Would love to have you. I'm always looking for other books to go ahead and review. And like I said, in the members only, I give a very detailed timeline of her life, which is incredibly fascinating. We lost her too soon. There was so much more, but she just, her darkness could not continue. So I'm going to leave it at that. And if you have not, I would recommend that you read Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf, or you can listen to it. Could be easier that way for you. Or you can, right here on YouTube, there is the 1979-ish movie that you can watch with Vanessa Redgrave. And they do a pretty good job. I mean, it's dated, but whatever. You know, a lot of the ancillary characters do not appear, but we have Clarissa Dalloway going through her day. We have Septimus Smith going through his day. And then we see how they intersect. There's also the beautiful intersection of the skywriting, which was the latest communicative technology of the day, as I hear a helicopter go overhead, which is also very fun. And she ties that in so well with the book as well. With that in mind, I will say thank you for joining me for my brief overview and rather stream of consciousness overview of Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf, a book I love, and it has been just very fun reviewing it with you today. Bye-bye.